All right, welcome back. So next we're going to talk about Bootstrap's custom inputs. What these are essentially customized versions of inputs that are usually set by your browser. Things like a checkbox. If we go and I actually have some code already running, this checkbox that we get, this blue checkbox with this exact checkmark shape, or this range input right here, it might be slightly elongated because of Bootstrap, but the button itself, the interface is coming from the browser. Bootstrap is not setting this circle and the color and the size and the shadow and all of that. Bootstrap is not controlling this button. These are all browser defaults. So custom inputs will actually change that. And it's just a little bit more syntax. And what they do is sort of fake a checkbox. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a moment. Or they fake a radio button. So on the docs, we go to Forms, Custom Forms at the very bottom. And all of these have a couple things in common. There's a class called custom-control, and then we specify custom-checkbox, for example. So to save time, I'm just going to copy this. You can see we have to add custom checkbox to a div, and then inside of that we have an actual checkbox, a regular one, and it has custom control input as the class on it, and then we have custom control label. So this document, which I've already made, it has just 4 inputs that we've already learned. So I just copy and pasted from our earlier checkbox lecture and the one where we did range inputs. I changed the text to say I'm a regular checkbox. So now what I can do is paste this custom checkbox below it, which is not a regular checkbox, and I'll just say I am a custom checkbox. Now I'll warn you, the checkbox difference is not very dramatic. It's not that exciting. You can see if I zoom in, first of all, we don't have this harsh edge. There's no shadow or anything like that. We get this solid flat gray. This top one is the default shape from the browser, and this is the custom one. So we get this focus around it. The check mark itself, it's kind of hard to tell, but it is actually a different shape. It's I don't know, this one's a little rounded. It doesn't matter anyway, but you can see there's a slight difference there, even if it's not the most obvious thing ever. But what's interesting is that the way this is done, if you actually inspect this, if we inspect the top one, this thing right here is an input. It's an actual checkbox. If we inspect this, this is not a checkbox as far as the browser is concerned. It's not an element checkbox. What it's actually done with is using CSS, the before and after pseudo classes. If you don't know what those are, don't worry. But the input itself is not showing up. Like if you hover over, this is where the checkbox itself is over here. So that's not what you're actually clicking on. So Bootstrap is sort of doing some stuff behind the scenes to make this look like a checkbox. It doesn't look that different, but just know there's a lot of effort that goes into doing this. In fact, you can see when you give something custom control input as a class, it sets its opacity to 0, which is going to hide it essentially. So it's there. This is the checkbox. They're linked together. When you click this thing, it is triggering this hidden checkbox. Okay, so next, let's talk about radio buttons. I'm just going to copy their code for radio button. The way that this works is that we do custom control on a div, custom-radio, and then we have input type equals radio, and we give it custom control input. That's the thing that hides it. And then custom control label is just the label. So I'm going to copy this and shrink this down a bit. Come over here below my radio buttons and save. And now if I zoom in a bit, we have the regular radio button that comes from the browser, and we have the Bootstrap custom version. It's slightly different looking. I mean, it's almost exactly the same again. It feels a little nicer to click, I guess, if that makes any sense. I guess I can't untoggle it right now. They're not actually grouped together, but you can see that they almost look the same. This one's a little sharper, a little darker, cleaner. And then in the state before they're clicked, this one is this flat gray. We don't have this shadowy thing. Okay, so that's how you make a custom radio button. So remember, the things that are in common. We put a div around custom control, and then we specify custom-checkbox or custom-radio. And then we still need the actual radio button or the actual checkbox, where are you, up here, and we just set custom control input, which hides it. So behind the scenes, there is an actual radio button here too. If we inspect again, I'll make it full screen. Let's see, where are you? So here is the actual input right there. You just can't see it. But if I set that opacity again, it's right there. That's the actual radio button. Okay, so now we'll move on to file inputs. So if we scroll down, go back here, full screen. Sorry for jumping around so much. There's just a lot to cover here. If we scroll down to the very last thing, or almost last thing, is the file browser. So this is what their custom one looks like. And it's a little different, the syntax. What you do is you start with, go down to file input, paste it in, a div class equals custom dash file. Now we can compare the two. This is the browser default and this is the Bootstrap one. And to do that, we had to just do custom file and then custom file input as a class and custom file label. So because this one's a little different, there's a couple of special classes. They're all custom file input, custom file label. Personally, I never remember how to do this from scratch. I just always go look at the docs and copy that. Last but not least, we have range inputs. So the custom range input I think looks really nice, and it's really easy to do. All that we do is make it input type equals range, but set the class to be custom dash range. And then we can also set a min and a max if you want. You can set a step. So you can see here, like we can't just drag it wherever, like here I can, or this one, excuse me, I could drag wherever I want. I could stop it here or there, but these ones have a step where it's moving by a set interval. So I'll copy and paste it. I'll make another form group. And then here we have our example range. So I'll change this to just say custom range. And then there we go. That's the first thing we can do right off the bat. We get this nice looking range, but we can go back and play with some of those attributes. Like if we scroll down, we can set a min and a max, separate attributes. We can set a step, 0.5 or something like that. So just to show you, I mean, you could do something silly like min equals 0, max equals 1. And now our custom range input has 2 states. It's a binary range. I mean, you could just do that with a checkbox. Or you could go from 0 to 3. Now we have 4 steps. 1 here, 2, 3, and 4. Anyway, I'll leave it there, but this whole video is just about creating these custom inputs. They take a little bit more work, but there's a lot more work that you would have to do yourself if you wanted a custom checkbox like this. Even though it's not the most spectacular thing ever, I think the file is a huge improvement. Obviously, this is very long, and we'll talk about shrinking forms down and constraining them using the grid system once we talk about the grid. Same thing, the range, I think it looks a lot nicer. So these are really useful, and they come up a lot, but I honestly just end up copying them from the docs whenever I need them. How often do you have to do a file input or a range input? In my experience, not that often. Okay, moving on.